This is a Tiny Power podcast,
a space where we celebrate the goodness and power within the tiny ones in our lives. I'm Vivian Quintella.
And I'm Taylor Wilding.
Hi, everybody. We are so excited to have you here. We actually have one of our favorite parenting influencers with us, John Fogel. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. Yes.
Oh, we're so excited that you're here.
Yeah, and we actually want to first off, want to know a little bit more about you. What got you started? We know that you are a dad of 3 boys.
Mm-hmm.
And just tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah. So, I think like all of us, when I first had kids, my first kid was born, nobody prepared me for any of this, and it happened to coincide when I was in school. And I was going to school for ministry and some other, it's an MDiv, a Master's of Divinity, which is a very kind of comprehensive degree. You get you become a master of, not a master, a jack of all trades and a master of none. And one of the things that I was studying at the time was master's degree level counseling. And so I come home every night to this child who I don't know what to do with. I mean, they tell you don't shake them in the hospital, right? Here's how you change the diaper. Here's how you burp them. If you're a woman, they teach you how to breastfeed and latch and that stuff, but they never actually tell you here's how you raise an emotionally healthy kid, right? Mm-hmm. And so I get home and every night and I'm learning all this stuff about child development. And then those two things were happening at the same time. And then we became licensed foster parents. And I started learning about trauma and I started learning about issues that come from having a problematic upbringing. And I started to see all of these things kind of come together and it just got me super excited. So I just started researching like crazy, reading journal articles, reading books, everything that I could get my hands on. And, that just was kind of, for me, it was just so that I could parent better and I could know kind of what to do and feel confident and not feel like I'm Googling something every single 5 minutes, which I did anyway, too.
Yes.
It didn't actually fix that.
We all kind of do it, right?
Yeah. I still Googled every single day. Is this normal?
Yeah.
So it didn't actually achieve that end, but it did make me feel a little bit more confident. And then when I started to have friends, and I was pretty young when we had our first. My wife and I are high school sweethearts, so we were pretty right after. Yeah, I know it's adorable and the grossest way, right? But we were high school sweethearts, went to college at the same school, in the same city that we grew up in, and then got married right out of college, and then a year after that had our first kid. And people are having kids much later now. In general, in general society, people have their first kid a lot of times in their 30s or in their late 20s. And so our kids were always older. And so my friends started to have kids and started to come to me and ask me questions oh, well, what do you do when they do this? And I had all this advice and they were you should put this on Instagram or something. And I just thought that was kind of silly. But then I had a TikTok profile blow up about something more related to my traditional schooling background. And I was you know what, maybe I will make a TikTok about this. And in 2 months, that TikTok had 200,000 followers. And it was wow. This is really helpful. And I'm able to use a lot of my counseling experience, which is part of my background, to meet with people and talk to them. And so I just started making videos and it just kind of went from there. So I know that was a really long way to answer that question.
No, I love that.
Yeah, we love to learn more about.
So inspiring and very fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about this because, like you said, you have a background in counseling and then you started researching child psychology and neuroscience. And we were actually talking right before this interview. And what makes you different, I feel is you make it very quick, easy steps, easy to remember, but you do know a lot about the brain and how a child's brain works. Can you give us just the dummy way of understanding a little bit about the child's brain and how all of these things that we can know about it can help us parent better?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think to say I know a lot about the brain is kind of, I would say that I don't know almost anything about the brain, but this is one of those things where the more you know about something, the more you realize you don't really know very much about it. The human brain is the most complex organism that we know of in the known universe. We go out, look at the most complex, neutron stars and all this other stuff. The human brain dwarfs all of these in complexity. It's the single most complex thing we've ever discovered. And so to say that like any of us really know about it is not really true. But here's the thing, like we've learned more in the last 30 years about the brain than at any point in human history by a factor of 10. So we know more today than we've ever known before. And so the way that I try and think about the brain is like, okay, so based on what we know, how can we view our kids a little bit differently? And the fundamental understanding that we have to have is that our kids' brains are some parts of them are really developed really early. In fact, when they're born, some structures in their brain, some activities that all of our brains do, they can do from day one, even though they can't talk or walk or communicate really almost beyond just crying. They can do some things, but then there's other things that they're not going to learn to do until they're in their mid 20s, maybe even 30 years old is what we're saying now. And then the brain changes throughout the life too. So it's not like your brain that you have at 30 is the brain that you're always going to have. Your brain's going to change as you get older. So the main thing that I try and tell people, if you need to know one thing about your kid's brain, it's that their ability to use reason, logic, rational thought, this is something that develops later. Their ability to feel deeply and have big feelings and big emotions and feel overwhelmed by their feelings, that's ready to go on day one. So their limbic system, their autonomic nervous system, that's their feelings. That stuff is all developed in utero. So you're already, you're getting a fully emotional person on day one. But
yeah, so that's what we focus on.
Their ability, and that's what we focus on. Right? Their ability to check that, and their ability to, like when you start getting upset and you go, wait a minute, should I really be upset about this? Hopefully you do, right? Like as adults, this is what we're supposed to do. And we go, do I need to be scared about that? When you see a scary movie and you go, you know what? I don't really, that's not real, all of that stuff that happens in your prefrontal cortex, or the neurocortex, and this it just does not happen for our kids very early on, right? So 7-8 years old, their prefrontal cortex is still very underdeveloped, and so we have to understand that, like when we're dealing with our kids, they're coming from a place where they literally can't get through their feelings without us. Their brain doesn't have the capacity in the same way that they couldn't walk at 4 months old. Their brain can't rationalize something that's scary at 6 years old. Like it's not possible. We have to teach them, walk with them, work with them, and use our brains to do that with them. And so that's the thing that you need to know about your kid's brain, is that having a fully developed amygdala and rather limbic system and what we call like the mammalian brain, the animal brain, having a fully developed brain in that way on day one versus the front part of their brain, like this is going to make your relationship with your kid feel like this until you realize it. And once you realize it, you go, oh, I'm just trying to tell them to do something that they can't do yet. It's the same thing as being mad at a 1-year-old for not, being able to read the Magna Carta. I mean, like they can't.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of this, then we actually get some from our followers. They've asked about, okay, how can I deal with a tantrum? I just need help with tantrums, right?
Yeah.
And I found you a while back before starting Tiny Power, and this is one of the first reels that I saw from you when you talked about taking a timeout with them instead of putting them on timeout. And I remember going to my husband and being like, oh my goodness, you need to watch this. Like, this is so good. Can you tell us a little bit about the timeout idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, first thing that we should say about timeout is that our parents, a lot of us who were raised in the 80s and 90s, we were given timeouts as an alternative to hitting, right? So kids who are raised, our parents, a lot of our parents are baby boomers who were raised in the 60s and early 70s. These people were most likely hit. They were struck when they did something wrong. And they tried to respond to that by going, that's not good. We need to come up with something better. So first thing we have to remember when we say timeout is that people get really, really triggered and they go, especially older folks who use this, and they go, I thought that this was a good thing to do. Well, it's probably not the best thing to do, just like we're going to learn in 20 years that some of the stuff that I'm talking about on Instagram and TikTok is probably not ideal for one reason or another. So the problem with the traditional go take a time out when you're upset is that what I just said about the brain, where they're really struggling to get a handle on their feelings. When you isolate a person who is completely overwhelmed, then they don't ever learn to deal with or move through those feelings. They just learn to kind of suppress them and learn that, like, this is not a good thing. I have to be separated away from other people when I feel this way. I'm bad for feeling this way because I'm being put in a corner, or I'm put on a naughty step, or whatever you want to call that. And isolation is really scary as humans. We're very social creatures. So you put a person in isolation. I mean, if you do this, like, this is a violation of the Geneva Convention, which people think is crazy, but it's torture to solitarily confine somebody. And kids, when they're overwhelmed, it feels like torture when you just put them off on their own. So instead I was like, but there is a place for calming down. You can't just let, or you shouldn't just let them completely go nuts and throw stuff through windows and hurt people when they're having these big, huge feelings that are overwhelming them. And so I was like, how can we isolate, or how can we go into a safe place without isolation? And so I'm a coach. I used to be a volleyball coach before I started having kids, and then I can't figure out how to do all this at once. But when I was a volleyball coach, I was like, man, when things would start to come off the rails on the court, whether it's basketball, volleyball, anything, you take a timeout so that you can kind of stop the flow of play. If it's things are starting to get out of control, you take a timeout and you reset everybody. And I was my big thing, and when I was a volleyball coach with high schoolers, I'd pull them aside and they would go, okay, coach, what do we do? And I said, oh no, this timeout isn't for me to tell you what to do. It's just to break up this pattern. You guys can do whatever you want, because all I need to do is stop the flow right now of the way this is going off the rails. We just need to reset. Remember what we're supposed to do. So I do the same thing with my kids. So instead, it's called a time in. Some people use it, but I just say, instead of putting them in a timeout, just take a timeout. Just go, timeout. We have to reset here. How are we feeling? And there's a lot of stuff we can do in that timeout, whether it's grounding exercises, or you can do executive function tasks, different things like this to help your kid calm down. But ultimately, it's taking that necessary break, breaking up that flow of that cycle, literally in their brain, of getting more and more escalated, more and more upset. You break that up, you put them on your lap or just in your vicinity. Maybe they don't want to be around you and you just sit outside their door, whatever that looks like, so that they don't feel alone in that feeling. And that's the goal. How can we help them not feel alone while also getting them out of these unhelpful cycles?
Because then it's something that actually translates into adulthood, right? You might be going through something and you find yourself, I'm just going to go off and not talk to anybody, and I just don't feel good about myself, and right? So we obviously don't want that for our children.
Right. And how many of us do this? Exactly. Right. Like, you have a hard day at work and you're like, somebody's like, oh, will you come out with us? And I understand there's like well, I'm exhausted, I don't want to go out. But there's this like, no, I just need to go home and watch Netflix. Right? Like, there's this self-isolation. We're terrified that our feelings are going to get us permanently ostracized by our friends and family. And so people hide, right? We go off and hide. And, why are so many of us, all up in our phones when we feel big things, right? When there's an uncomfortable moment with our spouse, why do we look at our phone? We're just trying to hide, right? Because that's how we were taught to deal with overwhelming feelings.
Yeah.
I know that when we're talking about emotions, a lot of kids, especially probably in the 3-year-old age range, they don't even know what these emotions are, right? And you always talk about the importance of labeling these emotions so that they can start learning, okay, this feeling is this and this feeling is that. How can we, and obviously this will help them be more emotionally intelligent once they know, okay, this is a feeling that I have and I know exactly what it is. How can we do better at labeling feelings?
Yeah, this is a problem for adults too, that I run into in just general when I speak to adults about issues that they're having and process through things. This is an issue for many people because we don't really have a way in Western society. We don't have like an emotional class, right? We teach kids how to understand history, hopefully, We teach them how to do basic math and how to read and write, but we don't teach them about the importance of being able to differentiate between, anxiety and stress. These are actually two fundamentally different things. And until we can figure out what's going on with them, we can't learn to name them or we can't learn to tame them. So Dan Siegel, very famous parenting author, says you have to name it to tame it. This comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, right?
Yep.
So you have to be able to put words to something in order for your brain to process it. We're emotional creatures. We feel our feelings before we think about our feelings. This is just the part of your brain that feels is faster than the part of your brain that thinks. And so you can, when you feel a big feeling, you can either be overwhelmed by it or you can name it and you can actually kind of categorize it, place it, organize it. And things that can be organized by our brain is just an organizing system. It's what it's trying to do. It's just trying to make connections. And things that can be organized feel much more manageable than things that don't have a place or are an abstract concept. So I think that the easiest way to do this, number one, is just to offer words to young kids when it's obvious what they would be feeling, right? And I don't want to say that we're always imposing. Eventually, we want to get to a point where they're the ones determining what this is. But when my 2-year-old is in a struggle with my 6-year-old, and my 6-year-old uses his power, his size, his strength to take a toy away and hold it up high, this is the definition of injustice, right? Somebody who doesn't have power, somebody who does have power. So I say, do you feel, to my 2-year-old, do you feel angry? Because anger is the natural response to injustice. If people think anger is disappointment or this, no, I use those words. Are you disappointed that we didn't get to go bowling today, to my 6-year-old who wanted to go bowling, or that we didn't get to go to a movie when you overheard me and mom talking about that might be a plan? That's disappointment. That's not anger, right? So understanding, number one, being able to name the emotions in yourself. You cannot teach your kids what you do not know, right? Period. So understanding what the different emotions are yourself, doing your own self-work, and then taking that and then applying that and just telling your child says, I'm really mad. So, oh, okay, well, what's making you mad? This. Oh, you're disappointed, and that makes you feel upset. So just offering them this language and this vocabulary really, really benefits. There's so much. All these Center for Emotional Intelligence has all of these resources that you can use too. But all of this stuff comes back to, just offering over and over a vocabulary so that your kids have the tools necessary to move through big things.
Yeah, I love that. And when we have those feelings, that we will say it out loud, kind of, this is how I'm feeling, so they see, oh, mom spilled something on the floor. It was frustrating or whatever. So right. I say, I'm frustrated because I did that. And then they learn, oh, that's what frustration looks like, Right. Yeah, I love that.
Right. And then allowing them to critique it. Yeah. This is another, the paths of communication between our kids. We've so been indoctrinated by a culture that says the path of communication is one directional, right? It's down. I am the adult and you are the kid. Kids are, have you ever heard it said, kids are to be seen and not heard, right? Well, what a dumb thing, right?
Yes.
It's just not true, but what a dumb thing, right? So often that's just not the case. And it's funny because people will impress a religious thing onto them and go, well, that's what my religion teaches me. And then I go, oh, well, I happen to have a background in world religions. And I'm just like, yeah, no, your religion doesn't. Every single religion has stories where you have a young person teaching something to an older person. This is fundamental in human life, that the communication is supposed to go bi-directionally. It's supposed to be a dialogue, not a monologue. And so this is when you in your example of saying, well, my kid, I'm frustrated. Saying my kid, I'm frustrated. And if your kid can critique that and go, but mommy, we can just clean it up. It's actually not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And then allowing for them to have that moment of you're right. It's actually not, you're right. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. And then maybe they'll be more accepting too when you're trying to help them, because they see that oh, I've done this before and I've helped my parents and now they're trying to help me when I'm feeling frustrated.
Yeah. Anything that you model to your kids, they're going to do right back to you. So if you model anger and aggression and using shouting to get your way and overpowering your kids in order to gain compliance, you're going to see a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, even if you do it when they're 3, right? You're going to see a 13-year-old who has learned and internalized that that's how we get what we want, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so
I've seen it before.
you've seen it, right?
I've seen it.
So
Yes.
we all know it. We all know it. So
Yeah.
if we model this, of whatever we model, we're gonna so if you model being open to correction and being open to nuance and having somebody co-regulate you, what are your kids gonna do? They're gonna go, oh, it's okay to do this.
Yeah.
Whatever you model is what you're gonna see. And by the way, the thing that upsets you is probably the thing that you're most shameful about that you're modeling.
Yeah.
I don't like it when my kid gets really, really upset about something really small. Do you know why? Because I do. And I hate that I can see myself and the thing that I don't like about myself coming out of my son. It drives me nuts.
It's true. Yeah. They learn from what they see, not so much what they hear us tell them, right? So we do need to remember that and be aware of that. Now we're talking about all of this, and I think that a lot of it has to do with our wanting to have this relationship with them and wanting to have a close relationship with them. You actually talked about in one of your reels about the 9 minutes that can shape the relationship with our children. Can you tell us what those 9 minutes are?
Yeah. This is from this really unique branch of science called I think it's called adaptive neuroscience. I'm forgetting in the moment. But this is from this really unique branch of science where we look at like these fundamental touch points with our kids from like an objective perspective, not like from the realm of psychology. And what was discovered and what the studies showed is that there are essentially 3 moments throughout the day where if you are able to give your full and undivided attention to your kids, those 3 moments have a much higher return on investment, for lack of a better term. And those 3 moments are, number 1, when they wake up in the morning. They're the 3 transition touch points. That's the easiest way to think about it because you don't have to like exactly remember. But when they wake up in the morning before they go to bed, so those 2 are basically for every kid. And then the third one is either when they get up from their nap at nap time. If you can do it when they're going down for their nap too, even better. But when they get up from their nap, when they come home from school, when they come home from whatever sport they're playing, when they come home from some sort of play group that they're in. So it's when they return home. And if you are there to provide essentially attentive care in those moments, number 1, you're going to learn so much about your kid's life that they're not going to tell you 15 minutes later. When they first get home, they're super, super ready to be open with you. And like if you may not care when they're 6 that they're super excited to tell you about Minecraft, right? Like I understand it's annoying, right? Like all kids go through phases where the things they're into are just kind of, nah, I don't care. But when you think about the groundwork that you're laying for a 14-year-old who's going to come home and tell you about the girl who got bullied in her class, or the person who is, she kind of knows she sat with 2 times at lunch, who just committed suicide, and it's deeply affecting her, but she doesn't know if it should deeply affect, like all of this stuff. This like really matters. And so you want to be that person. And so if you want that secure connection, these are the 3 times where you can kind of reap the most benefit for your time. And of course, the more time you're able to give to your kids to build those secure connections and be attentive to their needs and show up when they need you to show up and put down your phone when they're trying to get your attention. Like the more times you can do this throughout the day, the better. But if you do it at those 3 times, what the researcher, which I'm totally Pankstaff, was the Jack Pankstaff. What he discovered was that if you do it at these 3 times, like almost it doesn't matter what you do the rest of the time, that they will feel for some reason, to some extent, because of the state that their brain is in when they are in those 3 different places. That you can build these lifelong secure attachment relationships. And as long as you're not then, violating their trust other times and doing things like that, You really can do a lot with just 9 minutes.
Yeah, that's super powerful because sometimes it's so overwhelming feeling like, because like my goal for
Absolutely.
this year was to be present with my kids, you know? And so sometimes it's hard to feel like you have to be present 24/7, you know, or else you're going to ruin something or mess up
Right.
something. So I love that you say like those 3 moments, if anything, like give those, and then obviously everything else is like a bonus and you want to be with them as much as you can and be present as much as you can. But yeah, I love that you say that.
Yeah.
I've always thought in my mind, like how, because my mother-in-law is actually really good at this, getting her kids to open up with her, you know, and like learning more about them. And she takes into account things that they actually say, you know, like she'll follow up with questions like, oh, how is this friend doing that you told me about yesterday? Anyway, so I've always seen that and I'm like, I want that so badly with my kids. So I feel like this is a great starting point to get
Yeah.
that and gain that trust. And so, yeah, thank
Well,
you.
and just to remember that perfection is the enemy of purpose. This is the thing that I run into maybe more than anything else. I mean, I run into a lot of people's childhood baggage and trauma where they just say, hey, well, everything that you're saying, that happened to me and I'm fine. And I'm like, I understand that you've made meaning out of the things that have happened to you. That's a human thing that we do. Like that, I'm fine with that. Like, well, I deserve to be X, Y, and Z because I was a really bad kid. Yeah, I understand that you've internalized that, like, and that's important for you to be able to have a good relationship with the parents who harmed you. Like, I understand that, but I would say secondarily to that, the number one issue that I run into with parents is they just go, "You're giving us this ideal that is impossible to live up to," and what I try and offer people is like, no, I'm trying to give you what you're shooting for, like the goal, and if you are going to beat yourself up every single time you don't fulfill that perfect vision of parenting, like you're going to wind up quitting and just going, well, if I can't be present 100% of the time, then I might as well just not be present at all.
Yeah.
And that, that perfectionism that is so rampant in Western culture, especially towards women, because of plenty of factors, right? That perfectionism is the enemy of being a great parent. There's 1,000 ways, 10,000, 100,000 ways to be a great parent. There are 0 ways to be a perfect parent. Nobody's ever done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's actually something that you said too. You said we're always worried about being the perfect parent, but there is something better than perfection, right?
Yeah. Well, presence. Presence. And in fact, if you were able to be the perfect parent, like I imagine the Groundhog Day scenario, where you're living the same day over and over, and you just get to keep refining it and get it so that it's absolutely perfect. If you were the perfect parent, you would rob your child of 1,000 opportunities a day to watch you deal and cope with failure, and to watch you, like your child is not going to learn how to apologize unless you apologize to them for things that you should apologize for. Right? Your child's not going to know how to lose and how to cope with failure if you're always hiding your failure and you're losing from them. So being a perfect parent is actually counterproductive if you could do it, but you can't do it. And so, I think being a present parent, just showing up, however it is, right? Showing up with sadness when you're sad, showing up with happiness when you're happy, showing up with disappointment when you're disappointed, or frustration when you drop something on the kitchen floor, showing up fully for them. Now, you may need to shield them so that it's age appropriate. You don't need to go into the gory details of how your spouse cheated on you and exactly how that makes you feel because you're thinking about this image of them with someone else, right? Like you don't have to go there with your 6-year-old, but to say, I'm hurt and it's okay to be hurt and I'm going to get through this hurt actually is so empowering. So just show up. Just keep showing up. And I know that seems easy and hard. It's the hardest time in human history to show up and be present with your kids because we've never been more distracted. We've never been more overworked. We've never been more distracted.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just trying to go away from striving for perfection. It's so important for us to remember. I love all of the examples that you gave. Maybe this isn't the best thing to admit, but like I feel like when I've started, because I kind of just recently started getting into and seeing all these positive parenting accounts and advice. And when I just started applying it, I feel like one of the first things I saw was like my child apologizing to me. Because if I did something and I'm like, okay, that's not okay for me to talk to you that way, you know, I feel like immediately my child learned. Now she'll say, sorry for talking to you this way, or sorry for doing this to my sister, you know, like she learned that so quickly. So it is so powerful to let them learn from your example as well.
They're little sponges.
Yeah. Well,
yes. Yeah.
No, they have to. There is no other way, right? So the only way that your kids, you know, one of the things that I talk about a lot is the power that parents have. I mean, you guys are called tiny power, right?
Yes.
And the power inherent in what we do. It's the most difficult job that any of us is ever going to have. It's the most time-consuming job that any of us are ever going to have, and it's the most significant, right? We have incredible power. But showing up over and over and over, like that power is going to be acted on, right? They're going to learn from us to do that. And so because we're their first relationship, because we are their primary attachment, because we are the ones who they learn everything from, the ones who they pick up their little mannerisms from, the ones who they hopefully internalize values from, like all of that looks like being honest and showing up and apologizing when you don't have it all right. And you're right, your kids are going to do it back. And if you're defensive every time your kids confront you with something like, hey, dad, mom, you're not being very nice right now. If you're defensive and, oh, well, no, I am, you're just making that up. You know what your kid's going to do? They're going to be defensive.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that, because we do always talk about the power of our children, but we do have power, and it's a power for good.
Yeah, and along the same lines of power, for this last part, we have this thing called the Tiny 10, and we want to know from you in 10 seconds what you think makes a child powerful.
Do I have to say it in 10 seconds?
It doesn't have to.
I have a moment?
It doesn't have to be exactly 10 seconds.
Okay.
You can have a moment.
What makes our kids powerful?
Yes.
To us, I'm going to go that direction. To us, our kids have a unique ability to break up systems and cycles that are so unconscious to us that our children can actually be the gateway to becoming the person who we want to become.
I love that. Yeah,
so
it's learning from the child, learning from them and becoming more like them too.
Yeah.
And to, you know, our children are going to bring out the things in us that we can hide from everyone else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even our spouse. There are things that you can hide from every adult that your kids will drag up in you. Like people think that they dealt with their trauma, then they have kids and they go, oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like this happens all the time. And so this is like the fundamentals of conscious parenting, if you know that whole movement, and Dr. Shefali and conscious parenting movement. It's that our kids actually are the mirrors where we finally see ourselves clearly, where we can see ourselves through our defense mechanisms. They have incredible power. And I think the easy answer to the 10, the power, the tiny 10.
Tiny 10.
The easy answer is that our kids are the future, right? So like they're powerful because in 50 to 100 years, all of us will be gone and many of them will still be around, right? And that's, you know, that's the power that they have.
Yeah. And that's kind of at Tiny Power what we want. We want them to know their worth so that they can be kind and know others' worth as well, and that they can hopefully
change the generation.
Yeah, the rising generation, so that they will know these things growing up. And I loved that you mentioned at the beginning kind of that we're all learning new things, you know, like from what was done back in the 60s to the 90s to now, like even in 20 years, what our kids will be teaching their kids will be different. So I love that you mentioned that. But it looks like we're about to run out of time.
We're running out of time, but we want to let our audience know how they can find more about you. We just recommend you so much because you are quick to the point. It's points that you can remember when you're in the middle of it, right? It's not the science and steps. So can you just tell us how they can connect with you?
Yeah, well, and I should say, quick plug, you know, building intrinsic internal value for kids. This is the gold standard of parenting. So what you're doing with Tiny Power, I mean, this is the fun. Like if you want to talk about the gold standard of what's going to actually change the world, it's a generation of kids growing up knowing that they are fully loved, fully valued, just the way that they are. I mean, this is what allows the people to go out and do amazing things. So how can you learn how to do that with me? The easiest way probably right now is through Instagram. Instagram at Whole Parent. This is where I post almost everything that I do. You can also follow me on TikTok. My platform there is a little bit bigger, but I don't post there quite as much because it's only my videos. And then if you really do want to go deep, what I tell everyone is that, and YouTube too, I have a YouTube now. You'll see you could be like in the first 500 followers on my YouTube if you jump in there quick. But really the big thing is my email list. This is where so much, I really appreciate that I do get to do the quippy little videos and I can teach people on this kind of surface level, but in a minute, we can't really go like we've gone into it today, right? But every single week, obviously, there's no cost to being on my email list or anything like that. It's not like a subscription model for my emails. Every single week, I send out, really, it's like an extended blog post, like over 1,000 words usually, email to my followers my subscribers that just kind of walks you through one aspect of parenting. And we go into a deep dive. And that's where most people say, oh man, I really liked your Instagram. I really liked what you were doing on YouTube or whatever, or TikTok. And then I got on your emails and I was like, oh, this is actually how I'm going to parent way better, is like through these deep dive, difficult conversations, nuance, that type of stuff. So really the email list is it. But you can find that through any of my platforms, whether it's Instagram or TikTok. Just go in the link in the bio and my email list is right there.
Yeah. And for your Instagram, your handle is Whole Parent, correct?
Yep. WHOLE, parent, PARENT.
Well, I'm going to go and subscribe to your email list.
I know.
Because I haven't.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it.
Yeah. No, you'll love it. Sometimes I get like 1,000 email subscribers in a day because people, once they like share with their friends, they're like, oh man, like this is, not to toot my own horn, but that's where like the best of Whole Parent comes out.
Please toot your own horn as much as you want, because the work that
you're
you're doing
best
is
of Whole
so
Parent
good.
Comes out.
The work that you're doing is so, it's going to change generations. So we are just so grateful that you came and talked to us and gave us a little bit of your knowledge. And we're just so, so grateful.
Yeah, we could have talked forever. So
I know.
Yeah.
This stuff is so important.
It is.
It really is.
I wouldn't do it if it wasn't. This is a huge, huge tax on my life. And obviously my family makes a lot of sacrifices so that I can do this for me.
Yeah.
And for other people, but it's because it's so important. Yeah. I think this is really how we can change the world, is by parenting better. All of us.
You can tell your passion too. So
we hope to change the world together, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yep. It's going to take a lot of tiny power to do it, but we can do it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you everybody for joining us. Tune in next week. We'll have more of Tiny Power Podcast. Thank you.